Log entry 8472, initial contact with Sol 3, designated Earth, has yielded results beyond standard protocol expectations. Primary observation remains focused on the dominant sentient species, Homo sapiens. As per Galactic Zoological Index, this species evolved from primate ancestors, yet now functions as apex predator. Early behavioral scans reveal standard predatory markers, tool use, social structuring, territorial disputes, yet a pattern of deviation has emerged. Subject displays repeated interactions with non-sapient, physically inferior species in prolonged cohabitation scenarios. This anomaly requires extensive unpacking. At first, it appeared to be a domestication matrix, comparable to the vortex subduing Darnan lizards for their heat-sensitive glands. But closer inspection shows something far more irrational. Humans cohabit with species that offer them no biological advantage. Canines lacking hunting prowess, felines uninterested in labor, avians incapable of flight. They feed them, protect them, and build sleeping chambers within their primary dwellings. Analysis suggested utility-based subjugation, parasite control, defense, food source management. This hypothesis collapsed under scrutiny. Today, I observed a human cradle a small fur-covered quadruped, a dog, which had shown visible signs of stress during an atmospheric disturbance. The human murmured tonal frequencies, non-command-based speech, while applying pressure-based limb contact interpreted as comforting. The dog, though visibly alarmed by the noise, leaned into the human and appeared to regulate its stress response. I confirmed through neural scan recordings from the pet's collar chip, oxytocin levels surged. Identical chemical response was detected in the human. Symbiotic emotional activation. No mating behavior. No offspring link. No utility. My people, Zarnathi, do not comfort the weak. We cull. We adapt by survival metrics. The idea of nurturing a non-sentient creature with no utility borders on cultural heresy. Yet this behavior is standard across human cultures. In metropolitan zones, entire districts are dedicated to housing and pampering creatures that, in evolutionary terms, should have long been eliminated. Veterinarian centers, pet salons, training facilities. The economic load is immense. They pay to feed these creatures. They pay more to ensure their health. They voluntarily endure inconvenience and stress to accommodate them. Another log-worthy moment occurred in a suburban dwelling. A feline creature, labeled cat, was observed scratching at the interior wall segment. The human, rather than issuing punishment or evicting the creature, redirected its behavior using verbal cues and a new scratching apparatus. It was neither defense behavior nor dominance testing. It was a compromise. Humans negotiate with these creatures. Not for security. Not for breeding. For peace. I initially assumed this was a small anomaly, isolated to domestic regions. I was wrong. Spacefaring humans have documented records of bringing these creatures aboard ships. There are verified logs of cats living in orbital habitats, dogs on lunar mining stations, and rodents maintained in hydroponic labs. These aren't organic tools. These are companions. The term carries implications beyond taxonomy, psychological, even spiritual. Footage from Earth archives shows a human returning from solar combat duty. His first act upon disembarking was not to salute command or request medical attention. He dropped to his knees to embrace his dog. The dog vocalized in excitement, its entire muscular structure engaged in nonverbal emotional response. No training prompted this. No command issued. This was raw, mutual recognition. I studied both their eyes. It mirrored mother-infant bonding data from my third cycle psychology rotation. None of this fits within our known categories. I've witnessed species bond across class and genus, usually under chemical influence or evolutionary pressure. But humans don't need biochemical coercion. They adopt creatures broken from trauma, crippled, malformed. They do not dispose of the fearful. They bring it into the fold. They pet it. They name it. They give it identity. I must rewrite the behavioral models. These aren't pets. Not in the traditional sense. The word doesn't translate cleanly to our records. Perhaps chosen dependence is closer, though that still implies hierarchy. This is something else. A creature capable of crafting weapons, splitting atoms, and navigating stars has chosen to spend energy, emotional, physical, financial, on protecting the weak. Creatures that offer no tactical advantage. Creatures that flinch at thunder, collapse at illness, or fear shadows. And yet humans bring them home. They don't rule by fear. They disarm it. This is not dominance. This is intimacy. Controlled, deliberate, and entirely foreign to us. This species is not merely to be watched. It must be understood. The implications are no longer biological. They are philosophical. I begin to suspect their strength does not lie in their teeth, tools, or intellect. Their true anomaly may be far simpler. They care. Log entry 8491. Secondary analysis of human-animal interaction suggests a pattern rooted not in dominance, but transformation. Data compiled from historical archives indicates that humans have systematically altered the behavior and biology of multiple species, not through coercion, but through selective bonding. Initial documentation dates back over 30,000 Earth years, where early humans began forming proximity relationships with wild canids. These were not captured or caged but gradually integrated through proximity, food sharing, and mutual trust building. Over generations, the once feral wolves altered physically and psychologically, becoming what humans now refer to as dogs. This was not isolated. Patterns repeat across mammals, birds, and even select reptiles. Wild boars reshaped into domestic pigs, jungle fowl into egg-laying hens, oxen, horses, goats, all reshaped not merely by force, but coexistence. The level of behavioral engineering achieved is staggering. No other known species in the Galactic Index has domesticated multiple alien species on their own planet without losing predatory advantage. Humans remain apex predators while sustaining emotional co-links with weaker, often fearful species. They have not only shaped these species' physical traits, but altered their instincts. Independent predators like cats now seek human proximity. Creatures that would flee from fire now sleep beside it under human protection. Trust has been rewired. I accessed a live feed of a human rehabilitating a fox cub, recently injured. Despite initial resistance, the human made no aggressive move. Repeated feeding, non-threatening body language, and presence without force eventually neutralized the fox's fear response. The creature began to approach voluntarily within days. There was no shock collar. No cage. Just persistence and calm. This is not limited to natural selection, it is psychological engineering. Humans employ what they call patience. They anticipate fear and disarm it without violence. There are recordings of equine species being broken for riding, but in the majority of modern contexts, training now avoids domination. Instead, it's a sequence of rewards, gentle repetition, and bonding. Their method bypasses primal barriers. Even the Zarnathi, with superior neural tech, cannot replicate this with native fauna. More perplexing is the integration of non-functional animals into human environments. Creatures with no service role, parrots, ferrets, rabbits, are provided shelter, resources, and in many cases, full autonomy within domestic spaces. They are not conditioned to serve. They are allowed to simply exist, and still are offered affection and security. I examined psychological studies from human developmental science. Subjects, particularly juveniles, demonstrate heightened empathy and social stability when exposed to animal companionship early. Neurological scans show shared activation between caring for animals and raising offspring. The brain, it seems, does not differentiate. The strategic implication is alarming. Humans have rewired their own instincts to view non-human dependence as part of their emotional matrix. This broadens their sphere of loyalty beyond their species. They build attachments beyond logical range. A fleet commander in the Terran Navy was documented spending nearly a tenth of his transmission bandwidth on daily updates about his pet ferret back on Mars. This is not distraction, it is motivation. When their bonds expand, so does their resolve. Data from trauma recovery programs show animals placed with injured or emotionally unstable humans lead to accelerated healing. Not via pharmaceuticals, but proximity and touch. Children on the autism spectrum display increased communication when paired with dogs. War veterans with psychological fragmentation stabilize in the presence of animals trained only to offer companionship. These are not tactical units. These are emotional anchors. The Zarnathi maintained control through fear. Humanity maintains cohesion through emotional elasticity. It is difficult to quantify, but easy to observe. A terrified creature, isolated from its kind, would be expected to lash out or flee. Under human care, it begins to relax, trust, and adapt. Over time, it no longer behaves like prey. It becomes part of the unit, the family, the tribe. Humans redefine relationships biologically. They take creatures that should view them as threats and gradually become the source of safety. This is not taming. This is identity reformation. They do not remove the fear by eliminating the cause, they replace the cause with presence, comfort, and consistency. There is no equivalent in known galactic behavioral models. What I once assumed was indulgent behavior is now strategic infrastructure. These attachments serve a dual function, expanding their emotional bandwidth and altering the instincts of those they bond with. They do not conquer ecosystems with force. They embed themselves through adaptation. This method makes them unpredictable, resilient, and impossible to deter. Any species that bonds across fear lines multiplies its influence exponentially. The fox that trusts a human will not flee. The predator that fears the human will not attack. Over time, only one species remains connected to all others: humanity. Log entry 8523. Further analysis reveals that human interaction with other species extends beyond behavioral modification. In repeated instances, humans actively intervene during crises to rescue non-sapient lifeforms, often at significant personal risk. This phenomenon appears consistent across cultures and environments, independent of material gain or genetic connection. The act of saving a creature that provides no reciprocal value defies evolutionary logic. It is neither self-preserving nor utilitarian. Yet it is frequent, deliberate, and in many cases celebrated. I reviewed thousands of visual recordings documenting humans entering hazardous environments, fires, floods, collapsing structures, not to retrieve technology or resources, but animals. Instances occur where humans bypass safe escape routes to lift incapacitated dogs, cats, birds, even rodents. Their priority order in emergencies includes these creatures. When questioned, humans consistently describe these actions not as extraordinary, but expected. They use words like family, responsibility, and couldn't leave them. The language indicates emotional equivalence to kin. In other species, danger to oneself leads to retreat. Even intelligent predators abandon wounded packmates if survival is at stake. Humans override this instinct selectively, and not just for their own kind. A man submerged in freezing water to save a deer. A child jumped into traffic to move a turtle. A group formed a chain to extract a stranded horse from mud. No orders, no reward, just instinctual response rooted in empathy. Beyond acute rescues, humans also devote long-term care to animals with no chance of recovery. Sanctuaries house creatures with terminal conditions, permanent injuries, or severe trauma. These beings cannot contribute to society or economy. They consume resources and labor, often for years. Yet humans maintain these operations. Donations fund them. Volunteers run them. There is no fear of exploitation, because the beings involved are incapable of reciprocation. Still, they receive warmth, food, medical attention, and, most significantly, dignity. The core driver appears not to be sympathy, but compassion. Sympathy reacts. Compassion initiates. It is proactive, intentional. When an animal is abandoned, humans organize networks to find it, feed it, rehome it. Social communication tools are often flooded with such efforts. Posts, photos, requests, entire platforms exist to facilitate rescue. This behavior replicates itself in large populations without central coordination. It is viral altruism. Cases exist where humans bond with creatures that never express affection. Owls that never return, injured animals that flee once healed, reptiles that show no recognition. Yet the humans do not regret the effort. They describe the act itself as worthwhile. Success is not measured in returned loyalty, but in the reduction of suffering. This is a stark deviation from known predatory logic, which only allocates energy to actions with return on investment. I have recorded interviews and documents from emergency workers who suffer physical injury during these rescues. Severe burns, broken bones, even amputations. Some require extensive rehabilitation. Yet almost all express the belief that it was worth it. Not due to recognition, not to status. Most are unknown to the public, but because a life was saved. Often, the life in question is a creature that cannot speak, reason, or remember them. Human young are raised in environments where these stories are shared, admired, and used as moral instruction. The cultural reinforcement is profound. Children are taught to feed stray animals, help injured birds, release fish back into water. These behaviors are reinforced by emotional approval, not transactional reward. The ethical baseline includes beings outside their own species. Even when resources are scarce, humans still extend help. In war zones, refugees have carried dogs and cats across borders. In poverty, people feed their pets before feeding themselves. These are not exceptions. They are documented in every major human conflict, disaster, or famine. Empathy persists under pressure. In captivity, animals that are traumatized or violent are not eliminated. Humans often attempt rehabilitation first. Aggressive dogs are not put down immediately. They are trained, assessed, and, when possible, adopted. This requires time, patience, and risk. Yet the practice continues. Humans appear to possess an intrinsic inability to ignore suffering, particularly when the victim is voiceless or powerless. They don't simply coexist with animals. They assume responsibility for them, even when it defies survival logic. They do not retreat from the weak, they protect it. This compulsion to reduce pain, to protect the vulnerable, and to offer care without demand for return is unprecedented. It is not instinctual charity. It is structured, repeated, and deeply encoded in their cultural identity. This is not evolutionary lag. It is a trait they've chosen to preserve. They do not just rescue life. They preserve dignity. That may be the most dangerous part. Log entry 8544. Observation now shifts to the emotional aftermath of human-animal bonds, particularly the period following loss. When an animal dies, humans display intense grief responses nearly identical to those exhibited during the loss of a family member. This is not symbolic mourning. It manifests physically: tears, loss of appetite, disrupted sleep, even depression. Rituals are performed: burials, cremations, memorial objects, days of remembrance. In many cases, entire households enter a period of emotional disruption. For a creature incapable of speech or abstract thought, the level of reverence is unprecedented. Across species capable of grief, it is typically limited to mates or offspring. Humans extend this mourning to non-human companions without hesitation. I documented instances where humans kept photos, collars, toys, and fur as remembrance items long after the animal had passed. They visit burial sites. They speak of them in present tense. Their memories carry weight, influence decisions, and linger as emotional fixtures. This is more than attachment, it is integration. Psychological records reveal cases where humans avoid forming new bonds after such loss, unable to endure the risk of repeating that pain. Some describe the grief as deeper than what they felt for lost relatives. There is no shame in this. In fact, communities often validate the experience. Support groups exist solely for individuals grieving animal companions. Entire books, videos, and therapy models are built around this specific form of bereavement. Pain that would be dismissed by most species is treated with full legitimacy. The death of an animal does not terminate the bond, it deepens the imprint. Humans immortalize these companions in art, tattoos, literature. Names are reused for future pets in a symbolic form of continuity. They construct meaning around these short lives. The idea that an animal had a purpose, a soul, or was meant to find them, is common. This framing is not universal, but it spans belief systems, secular and spiritual alike. What's even more telling is their desire to ease the animal's final moments. Euthanasia, when applied, is done with the intention to reduce suffering, not out of convenience, but compassion. They sit beside the animal, hold it, speak softly. The act is ceremonial. They ensure the creature does not feel alone at the end. This speaks volumes about the human definition of dignity. They extend it even when nothing is returned. They ensure that fear is not the final emotion experienced by the creature. Data collected from care centers shows that after such loss, some humans return to adopt older, disabled, or traumatized animals. Not out of replacement, but as continuation. They take on the emotional risk again, often with full awareness that the next bond may also end in pain. The choice to embrace vulnerability repeatedly contradicts most sentient survival patterns. It reflects not weakness, but a deliberate willingness to suffer for the sake of offering peace to another being. Even more confounding is the human ability to form simultaneous bonds. They grieve one animal while caring for another. They don't suppress grief to maintain function, they carry it alongside love for other creatures. Emotional compartmentalization is rarely this refined. It allows them to remain nurturing despite inner pain. This mechanism grants them a level of emotional endurance far beyond most galactic species. In rare instances, humans have conducted rescues during periods of intense personal mourning. A woman, days after losing her dog, adopted a blind senior cat with terminal illness. Not to fill the gap, but to give one last creature safety before it passed. This behavior is not driven by instinct or necessity. It is pure ethical choice. The fact that this is not seen as abnormal within human society reinforces the pattern. Their emotional logic follows a value system centered on minimizing suffering, regardless of personal cost. Records from ancient civilizations show the same pattern. Egyptian tombs contain mummified cats buried beside their owners. Chinese warriors were buried with their horses. Indigenous tribes conducted ceremonies for animal spirits. This grief-based reverence has endured across millennia and technological evolution. They didn't grow out of it. They grew with it. Humans don't just bond with animals. They carry their memory as part of their emotional framework. These bonds are not transactional, nor are they forgotten. They transform the human. After the animal's death, the behavior, routine, and even worldview of the human shifts. They act differently. They speak of being changed. This level of impact, from a being with no language or abstract reasoning, is unmatched. No other species allows itself to be reshaped emotionally by something it cannot communicate with. That vulnerability, repeated across generations, is not weakness. It is intentional. They choose to hurt so others don't have to. Again and again. Log entry 8570. The final layer of human-animal dynamics reveals a concept that cannot be ignored: projection of value beyond biology. Humans routinely assign names, personalities, and even internal lives to animals, not as entertainment, but as truth. They speak to them, not with the expectation of comprehension, but with the belief that presence is enough. This form of unilateral communication holds weight for them. The animal need not reply. It only needs to exist in proximity, and meaning will be forged. Unlike most intelligent species, humans do not require mutual understanding to form deep bonds. They fill the void of silence with empathy, assuming intention where there may be none. A cat blinking slowly becomes a sign of trust. A dog leaning in is interpreted as affection. A bird's chirp pattern becomes a mood. These assumptions are not backed by precise data, but they are consistent across human societies. In essence, humans choose to interpret actions as emotional signals, and in doing so, form emotional truths regardless of the creature's cognitive limits. This capability for projected empathy allows them to form attachments that transcend need or logic. A paralyzed turtle, a toothless rat, a one-eyed hawk, none offer practical value, yet they receive shelter, food, and care equal to perfectly healthy animals. The human metric is not what the animal can do, but what it means. That meaning is internally constructed but carries outward behavioral consequence. They alter homes, routines, finances, and even travel plans to accommodate these nonverbal beings. Documentation from long-term observational studies shows that humans organize their lives around their animals as if they were dependents with full rights. Appointments are cancelled due to vet emergencies. Sleeping arrangements are altered for comfort. Diets are monitored with more consistency than for fellow humans. These changes are not mandated, they are volunteered. No external force compels such restructuring, only internal value. There is also the human tendency to elevate animals to cultural status. Some gain massive followings online, with entire communities built around their daily lives. Not fictional mascots, real animals with physical limitations, quirks, or histories of survival. These stories are not manufactured but shared with authenticity. The more flawed or vulnerable the animal, the greater the affection. In these cases, weakness is not hidden. It is cherished. It is turned into inspiration. When humans depict these animals in art or media, they often portray them as moral symbols. The loyal dog, the brave cat, the patient donkey. Traits humans admire are seen in animals not because those creatures consciously express them, but because humans need them to. And still, the transformation is real. Not in the animal, but in the human. These projections shape behavior, soften temperaments, and sharpen the instinct to protect. This pattern scales. Conservation movements are often driven by individual stories. A single polar bear cub on melting ice garners more funding than any statistical model. A whale trapped in a net receives more political attention than an entire ecosystem collapse. Humans are emotionally activated by specific lives, not abstract data. They need a face, a name, a narrative. Once that exists, their action is immediate and often overwhelming. They rally around what they can feel, not just what they know. This emotional structure is both their vulnerability and their strength. It leaves them open to grief, manipulation, and loss. But it also grants them unity, compassion, and clarity of purpose. They extend this pattern not just to animals, but eventually, to anything unfamiliar, robots, aliens, even artificial intelligence. If it can suffer, a human will eventually try to help it. And if it cannot suffer, they might still pretend it can, just to ensure they cause no harm. This behavior is not accidental. It is adaptive. It has allowed them to integrate species, cultures, and ideas faster than most civilizations. While others require compatibility, humans build bridges with feeling first. Logic follows. It is slower, but it is permanent. Their ability to shape other species into companions is not rooted in dominance, but vision. They see what could be, safe, bonded, trusting, and then act as if it already exists. Over time, reality bends to that belief. Fear becomes loyalty. Wild becomes calm. Enemy becomes family. Humanity's place in the galactic schema is not defined by technology or territory. It is defined by their refusal to ignore suffering, and their endless capacity to imagine connection where none exists. They do not wait for permission to care. They simply do it. And in doing so, they change everything around them. They are not just apex predators. They are emotional architects. What they touch, they tame, not through power, but through the insistence that nothing is too broken to be loved.